The night was calm, and the Johnson family had no reason to suspect that their ordinary evening walk would turn into a tale of intergalactic chaos. The moon hung lazily in the sky, casting its glow over the empty suburban streets. Their two-story home stood quietly in the distance, the porch light flickering just slightly, as if in hesitation. The father, Greg, led the way, hands in his pockets, oblivious to the thin hum that had begun to fill the air. The mother, Linda, glanced at her children, 10-year-old Benny and 15-year-old Claire, who were bickering over who could spot the brightest star. And then, without warning, the sky split open. A beam of light, cold and blue, slammed into the pavement. Time seemed to freeze for a fraction of a second before reality was pulled apart like a threadbare cloth. And in the next moment, the Johnsons were no longer on their street. They were nowhere near Earth. Weightlessness surrounded them, before a metallic floor materialized beneath their feet. The air was thicker, carrying an odd scent that was neither unpleasant nor familiar. A curved ceiling arched above them, pulsing with faint lights, like a living heartbeat. They weren't alone. Shadows flickered in the distance, shifting like liquid, forming and reforming, as if deciding what shape they preferred. The Johnsons had been abducted, or so they thought. And then, their captors, or rather, their hosts, emerged fully into view. One of the aliens moved forward, raising a long-fingered hand. A soft hum filled the room, and suddenly, the Johnsons knew what was happening, not through speech, but through understanding, implanted directly into their minds. This wasn't an abduction. It was an exchange, a swap of cultures. And here's the realization that hit hard. While the Johnsons were taken to experience an alien way of life, their home was no longer vacant. Another family, one that was decidedly not human, had just arrived in their place, stepping into their home, their town, their world, and they had absolutely no idea how humans functioned. Back on Earth, the alien replacements were already causing havoc. The neighbors, accustomed to polite nods and occasional barbecues, were now witnessing a spectacle beyond comprehension. The alien father stood in the front yard, tilting his elongated head at the sky, as if trying to understand the very concept of clouds. The mother was inside, having discovered the microwave, and, mistaking it for a sacred human transformation device, had begun inserting household objects into it at random. The scent of burning fabric filled the air as a pair of socks sizzled and crackled, the microwave flashing dangerously, and the children, if they could even be called that, were equally confused. One of them had wandered outside and was currently attempting to communicate with the lawnmower, convinced it was the dominant life form of the house. Another stood motionless in the living room, its eyes glowing, as it accidentally activated a psychic pulse. The force rippled outward, stunning a nosy neighbor mid-sip of their coffee, leaving them frozen in place, with an expression of absolute bewilderment. And here's the truth. The chaos was only just beginning. The alien replacements were proving to be more than just an oddity. They were a full-blown catastrophe in the making. The father had taken up residence in the backyard, attempting to bond with the local wildlife by emitting a series of warbling clicks that sent birds scattering in all directions. Meanwhile, the mother had moved on from microwaving household objects to rearranging the furniture into what she believed to be optimal spatial harmony, which unfortunately involved balancing the dining chairs on top of the refrigerator. And let's be honest, the neighborhood was beginning to take notice. Mrs. Henderson, the self-proclaimed watchful eye of the street, had already called her book club together to discuss the strange behavior of the Johnsons. Even more concerning, the mailman had reported that his mail scanner inexplicably malfunctioned every time he set foot near the Johnsons' mailbox, leaving him convinced that their home was haunted, or worse. And things took an even stranger turn when the alien children began their integration into human culture. And things took an even stranger turn when the alien children began their integration into human culture. One of them had latched onto the concept of pets and, having mistaken the Roomba for the family dog, had spent the better part of the morning feeding it pieces of fruit, while speaking in a series of strange harmonic tones. The other had discovered the television, but, unable to grasp the purpose of commercials, assumed they were distress signals, and promptly attempted to rescue every actor, pleading for better insurance coverage. And then, the potluck happened. When the aliens attempted to participate in a neighborhood potluck, the situation escalated. Having observed human eating habits, they arrived carrying a dish of their own creation, a gelatinous, pulsating mass that radiated a mild hum and changed colors when touched. The horror on their neighbors' faces was immediate, and when Mr. Thompson bravely poked it with a fork, it let out a distressed chirp and promptly disintegrated into a fine mist. And here's the truth. Back aboard the alien ship, the real Johnsons were rapidly realizing the gravity of their situation. If they didn't return soon, they might not have a normal life to return to. But getting home was proving to be more complicated than they had anticipated. Trapped aboard the alien vessel, the real Johnsons were quickly learning that interstellar travel was not as glamorous as the Johnsons had imagined. Gravity shifted without warning, sending them floating weightlessly, only to be slammed back down onto the metallic floor. The air carried a low, persistent hum, and the walls of the ship seemed to shift, almost as if they were alive. Their hosts, while not hostile, were utterly indifferent to their confusion. Communication was strange. Pulses of energy reverberated through their bodies, leaving behind an odd sense of déjà vu. The Johnsons struggled to grasp the alien customs, especially when it came to food. Meals appeared as floating orbs, their colors shifting to indicate flavors. Absorbing them through the skin was unsettling, and left Greg questioning his very existence. Claire, ever the pragmatist, took it upon herself to study the ship's controls. Benny, however, had formed an attachment to a floating drone, treating it like a pet, despite its clear reluctance. Linda, filled with anxiety, could think of nothing but what was happening back on Earth. And what was happening back on Earth was pure chaos. The alien replacements were struggling to grasp human customs. After the potluck incident, they tried to redeem themselves by participating in trash day. But instead of placing garbage bins neatly on the curb, they meticulously rearranged the waste into what they called aesthetic patterns of decay. The result? A chaotic masterpiece of overturned bins, scattered recyclables, and an inexplicable pyramid of old newspapers. Horrifying the sanitation workers, the children were no better. The Roomba had been declared a sacred companion, now perched upon a makeshift throne of couch cushions, carried in an elaborate coronation ceremony. The television, long since deemed a distress beacon, had been completely dismantled, its components laid out in a perfect circle, glowing under an unknown energy field. And then, the final straw, the alien father, in a desperate attempt to blend in, introduced himself at a neighborhood meeting by hovering 3 feet off the ground and reciting a series of guttural sounds. Half the attendees were sent into a trance. The town's suspicions had reached critical mass. Back aboard the spaceship, the real Johnsons were running out of time. They needed to convince their hosts to return them to Earth before their neighbors called in an exorcist, a scientist, or worse, the government. And here's the truth. The alien replacements had reached a breaking point with the neighborhood. What had once been seen as quirky behavior was now a full-scale disturbance. The town's patience was wearing thin, and whispers of intervention spread like wildfire. Mrs. Henderson, the self-appointed enforcer of normalcy, had taken it upon herself to document the Johnsons' bizarre behavior. Her list of violations included floating above the ground without explanation, whispering to the sprinkler system as if it held divine secrets, and perhaps the most damning of all, mowing the lawn in the middle of the night, using what appeared to be telekinetic energy. And then, things escalated. The aliens, desperate to fit in, decided to join a local bake sale, but lacking an understanding of human food, they crafted shimmering, levitating pastries that emitted a low, melodic hum When the mayor took a bite, he gained the ability to see into alternate dimensions. And just like that, the town fell into mass hysteria. Meanwhile, the alien children had discovered school and immediately attempted to integrate. Benny's teacher first noticed something was off when his assignments rearranged themselves into incomprehensible symbols as soon as they were graded. The principal, after witnessing one of the children casually phase through a locked door, promptly resigned on the spot. Back aboard the spaceship, the real Johnsons had reached their own crisis. Claire, after days of studying the ship's controls, made her move. Her fingers danced across the panel, alarms blared, lights flickered, and the ship lurched forward at an impossible speed. The alien hosts, caught off guard, scrambled in confusion. Earth was coming back into view, but what awaited them was uncertain. And here's the truth. The Johnsons barely had time to brace themselves before the ship plunged through Earth's atmosphere. A shimmering burst of light enveloped them as they materialized back onto their quiet suburban street. But their neighborhood was anything but normal. A crowd had gathered. The alien replacements stood on the porch, looking rather pleased with themselves, despite the complete catastrophe they had caused. The lawn was littered with levitating objects. Some neighbors were still entranced, and the mayor, wearing sunglasses to block dimensional glimpses, struggled to address the media. And then, everything froze. The alien imposters locked eyes with the real Johnsons, a moment of recognition, and in perfect synchronization, they raised their hands in a farewell gesture. A low hum filled the air. Their forms shimmered, and in a flash, they vanished into the night sky. Silence followed, and then Mrs. Henderson fainted. The Johnsons exchanged weary glances and did their best to reassure the crowd. Their explanation, a government exchange program, and surprisingly, everyone accepted it, because the alternative was far more disturbing. The town, eager for normalcy, decided to pretend none of this had ever happened. And so, life returned to its rhythm. The neighbors stopped staring. The school dismissed it as a prank, and the mayor, despite his occasional flashbacks of other dimensions, resumed his duties. One quiet evening, the Johnsons sat on their porch. The stars shimmered above, distant yet familiar. No one spoke until Greg chuckled. "Well," he thought, "at least we got out of hosting the barbecue this year." And with that, the family shared a knowing smile, because no matter how strange things got, Earth was still home.
If you like this video, then do subscribe to this channel